Today's review is sponsored by the new Slasher Exercise Plan. We'll send you one psychotic killer a day and just watch the weight melt off. There's no better motivation than running for your life. And losing a limb counts as weight loss.
Watch it, Alan. I'm shooting.
Deranged. We're finally back, people. Last week I asked you guys what movie you'd like me to review for this week. The choices were Deranged, Alligator, Who Can Kill a Child, and The Blood-Spattered Bride. Now, the majority of people wanted me to talk about Deranged, but Alligator was very close. So we're going to talk about all four movies, but we're going to start with Deranged now, and then we'll do Alligator next week. And I want to thank you all for your patience these past couple of weeks. It's been very busy and hectic with various things going on, but thank you all so much for your patience, and I am so sorry that it's been a little scattered with the videos the past couple weeks, but we're getting back on track now, so let's get into the murder and mayhem. The Ed Gein crimes have had a huge influence on the horror genre. The tragedy inspired Psycho. It did inspire Silence of the Lambs a bit, but Ed Gein was not the only killer to inspire what went on in Silence of the Lambs. But in 1974, we had two movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Deranged.
Now that you stand warned, we can proceed with our story. It is the story of Ezra Cobb, murderer, grave robber, necrophiliac perhaps.
Now, when it comes to movies inspired by Ed Gein, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of my all-time favorite movies, and for me, it's the best of those kinds of movies. But with Deranged, at the time, it was the movie that was the closest portrayal of the actual events. Now, the film did take some liberties, but at the time, this one was the closest portrayal. They changed the names in the film and the locations, and like I said, they did take some liberties here and there. We follow Ezra Cobb, who is our Ed Gein stand-in for the film. The movie opens with the death of his domineering mother, and then after that takes place, we watch Ezra descend into madness, which eventually leads to the darker things that we know happened in real life. Grave robbing and murders. We watch as Ezra steals his mother's body from the graveyard and then brings it home, preserves it to the best of his abilities. We then follow him as he steals body parts from the local graveyard, and it eventually gets to the point where he starts murdering people to keep this twisted fantasy that he's created in his head alive.
Comes from right down here.
It's interesting seeing who was involved in the making of this film. Bob Clark, who directed Black Christmas, which came out that same year, was originally supposed to direct Deranged, but he found the movie too disturbing, so he ended up just being an uncredited producer on the film. And Tom Savini was part of the makeup department for this flick. I don't know for certain if this was the first movie he worked on, but this is a film that he worked on before he did Dawn of the Dead, so that's just interesting to me.
There she comes now, real easy.
And then we have Ezra Cobb, played by Robert Blossom. He went on to be the old man in Home Alone. I guess, Kevin had every right to be afraid of this guy. But yeah, this is a movie about Ed Gein, with names changed and little tweaks here and there done for the sake of making a movie. The Ed Gein case had such a huge impact on the horror genre. It had such a huge impact on the country in general. Real-life events always influence art. Movies are no different. And when Ed Gein's House of Horrors was discovered, it really struck a nerve with people because, Americans back at the time, they didn't want to think that horrible things like this happened in their backyard. In their minds, these kinds of things happened far away from them. But no, this was one of the incidents that showed how close this kind of stuff can be.
After that, Ezra made many visits to the graveyard, bringing home bodies, or parts of bodies, to keep his mother and himself company.
Now, it is important to say that we only know of 2 people that Ed Gein actually killed, and he was only convicted for one of the murders, I believe. It is believed that he did kill more people, but due to the amount of body parts in his house, and due to the ethics at the time, as soon as the evidence was photographed and cataloged, the evidence was then quickly disposed of, which prevented further forensic investigation. So, yes, it is strongly believed that Gein did kill more people, but we will never know the exact amount. The only ones we know for certain are the 2 people, those being Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden. In addition to the murders, we know about the grave robbings. Ed Gein stole body parts from the graveyard, he brought them home, and he would make things out of those body parts. He would make furniture out of them, he cut the tops off of a few skulls and was using them as bowls, he made himself a skin suit, and he worn that. Really, really horrifying stuff. The police officers who discovered what was going on in that house suffered PTSD years after the events happened. Now, this is only the very basics of the Ed Gein case that I'm getting into. You could do like an hour-long video on Ed Gein alone, but I'm just giving you the very basics here. If you are interested in the case, I do encourage you to look into it yourself. There's a lot of information there, but it is gnarly. The movie Deranged does a good job at telling the story. It does take liberties, as I said before, I've said that a few times already, but yes, it's important to say it does take liberties with the story. But again, at the time, this was the movie that was the most accurate to the actual events.
Now he intended to restore. And to that purpose, he began reading everything he could about embalming, taxidermy. But it wasn't an easy job.
Focusing on Deranged as a movie, it's very effective. It's disturbing without being that graphic. There are moments in here that are kinda graphic. I would put the violence in Deranged in the same category as the violence from movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas. All 3 movies handle their bloodshed in a similar way. It's more the ideas that are disturbing. We know what Ed Gein did, and the thought of that alone is enough to make this a creepy horror movie. There are scenes where we see Ezra interacting with the corpses, and it's fucked up.
But you 2 ladies have a lot to talk about.
Robert Blossom does a good job at playing Ezra Cobb. He's just the right amount of quiet awkwardness. He mostly keeps to himself, much like how people described Ed Gein in real life. Robert Blossom does a good job at being awkwardly harmless while still letting the psychopath peek through here and there. You believe him as this character that people wouldn't really give a second glance to. You can tell that people would say about this guy, they would say, yeah, he's weird, but he's harmless.
Nothing, sir. It's just a hog I butchered is all. I forgot to take it out of the truck is all. It kind of got to smell it.
Jesus Christ, you ain't kidding.
But for me, what works best in this movie is the set design. Deranged had a budget of about $200,000, a little more than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which had a budget of $140,000. A decent budget, but still a hard budget to work with. Both movies knew how to use their budget where it counted. Just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Deranged has that dirty feeling to it. It did a good job at showing how filthy Ezra's life is, showing you what his world is like inside this house.
The only thing that bothers me, I don't think she's, all there. In upstairs.
When we're outside of the house, we have that sense of normalcy. But once we go back into that house, we feel this nightmare world that Ezra feels comfortable in. The most unsettling scene for me is when Ezra is sitting at the dinner table with a bunch of his corpse pals. The scene feels a little like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which makes sense because they were both inspired by the same crime, but just a little bit though. We have a person tied up at the dinner table, but unlike in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where it's this psychotic family, in Deranged it's just one guy sitting at the table with a bunch of corpses. It gives you that dirty, gritty, unsettling feeling that you want in a movie like this.
It's all set up for you.
While I do think that Deranged is a good movie, I wouldn't say that it's one of my favorite 1970s horror movies. I don't think it would even make the top 50. But, despite that, this is a good movie, and it is a decent portrayal of the Ed Gein case. If you're going to watch one horror movie that was inspired by Ed Gein, watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then Psycho, and then Silence of the Lambs, but after you watch those, check out Deranged. In all seriousness, Deranged is a good true crime horror movie that I would recommend to horror and true crime fans. And with that, let's get to the Grindhouse rankings. We've got a body count of 4. The kills consist of a couple gunshots, natural causes, and one person being bludgeoned to death. There is a little nudity towards the end of the film, but not much more than that. The kills aren't the main source of dread in this movie, it's more Ezra's sick world that he creates in his home. This is a good portrayal of the Ed Gein case. It does take plenty of liberties, but it was the closest adaptation at the time. The movie does a good job at creating that dirty, gritty atmosphere that you want in an exploitation horror movie. Robert Blossom does a good job at playing Ezra Cobb. You believe him to be this killer that no one would give a second glance to. But it is the set design that makes this movie, for me at least, creating this dirty house of horrors which gives the movie its disturbing atmosphere. I'm giving this a 3.9 out of 5. While not my favorite 70s horror movie, it's still a good flick that is well worth your time, especially if you're into true crime. As always, I want to thank all of you for continuing to watch and support this channel. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know your favorite movie that was inspired by Ed Gein. This is the Maniac, here to remind you that the Grindhouse will never die. By the way, did you know that there's a movie called Ed Gein the Musical? Yeah, that's a thing.